This is the General and Interpreter volunteer training for the Citizenship Day program at OneAmerica. Thank you for volunteering with us and taking the time to watch this training. Here is a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. We'll go briefly through the benefits and the barriers to citizenship, quickly cover the legal requirements for citizenship, including basic eligibility, mainly for background for you, red flags or people who should not apply for citizenship. We'll go through Citizenship Day logistics and what to expect of volunteers at a Citizenship Day event. We'll cover what happens at each station and the guidelines for people who are working as interpreters. So what is Citizenship Day? It's a day-long free legal clinic, and our goal is to help as many legal permanent residents apply for citizenship as we can. This program was actually founded in 2004 by the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and they used to do one Citizenship Day in one city every year. Now we do about 11 events every year, and it's one of the only free programs of this type that still exists. Since 2008, more than 4,000 people have been able to fill out their applications for citizenship at Citizenship Day. There are many benefits to applying for US citizenship, as opposed to being just a legal permanent resident. One of the biggest is that only US citizens can vote. There are certain federal jobs and other public positions that require US citizenship. As a US citizen, you can run for public office, you can access federal financial aid, and certain scholarships that are only available to US citizens. You can never be deported as a US citizen. A green card does not guarantee one against deportation. It doesn't guarantee you admission at the border after a trip abroad, and so having a US passport can really be a good thing to have. One of the biggest benefits that many of our clients cite at Citizenship Day is the ability to sponsor their family members who live in their home countries to immigrate to the US. This includes parents, spouses, children, brothers, and sisters. And if they have children who live with them in the US already, who are under 18, they can derive citizenship through their parents automatically. So with all these wonderful benefits, why don't more people apply for citizenship? Just in Washington state alone, there are about 180,000 green card holders who are eligible for US citizenship, but less than 10% of them have applied. That's because a number of barriers are associated with the process. The form itself costs $680 to file, and then retaining an attorney starts at about $1,000. It's really smart for a lot of people to have competent legal assistance and representation throughout this process. Difficulties with English can be a huge barrier for people, as there is an English requirement associated with applying. There's not very much legal assistance available, much less affordable legal resources, especially in the rural areas of our state. The process itself is really complicated and hard to understand, and can generate a lot of fear in potential applicants because it is long, arduous, and very difficult to understand. Let's now cover really quick the responsibilities of volunteers at Citizenship Day. Number one is to come prepared. We want everyone to be able to review the station instructions beforehand, so all of the station's duties and responsibilities are familiar to you. You can be stationed at one of a number of different stations. We ask that you adhere to our policies and procedures. Ask the OneAmerica staff who are present or other volunteers who have come to Citizenship Day often when you have questions. Be kind and courteous to all clients, and please be flexible. This day can change very rapidly, so we have to be flexible and adapt as the needs arise. I'm going to take you through the basic eligibility requirements for someone to file for citizenship. You have to be at least 18 years old, you have to meet certain residency requirements. Physical presence requirements are a little different from residency. Residency has to do with where you maintain your primary residence or primary home, and physical presence is actually how many days out of a certain period of time you physically spent inside the United States. All applicants for naturalization do need to prove what they call good moral character. This can be a fairly complicated concept, and we'll talk a little bit about it in a minute. Clients need to be able to speak, read, and write basic English. There are some exceptions to this, but generally English is a requirement. Applicants must have a basic knowledge of US history and civics and be willing to take the oath of allegiance to the United States. Under the Child Citizenship Act, Any child who is under 18 automatically becomes a US citizen when at least one of their parents naturalizes. The only conditions for that are the child must be a lawful permanent resident, they must have their green card, and they must be residing in the physical and legal custody of that US citizen parent. This part won't be super important for your role as a general volunteer at Citizenship Day, but I just want to go through a little more in depth with the requirements for citizenship, mainly so that you have a background understanding of how complicated the naturalization law and process can be, because it helps people appreciate the process that naturalization applicants have to go through in order to access citizenship. A lawful permanent resident, in order to apply for US citizenship, has to be residing in the US for at least 5 years and have that lawful permanent resident card for at least 5 years. If they're married to a US citizen, they're allowed to apply early, under the 3-year rule, so long as they're married to that US citizen for those 3 years and have their permanent resident card for 3 years, they can apply early. Residence must be continuous. Absences and trips abroad are allowed, but they cannot exceed a certain length, or USCIS considers that the person has broken their residence in the US. They must live in the state where they file the N-400, the application for naturalization, for at least 3 months. They must reside in the US from the time they file their application to when they take their oath. Small trips are allowed, but they must be careful not to lose their residence, and they are allowed to apply 3 months before they hit that 5-year mark, or the 3-year mark if married to a US citizen. This is because from the time of filing to the interview, there is generally a long waiting time, anywhere from 4 to 8 months depending on which office, so this allows the applicant to get a head start on the process. Here's an example of the permanent resident card, also called the green card. They have changed it quite a bit over the years, but one thing that a lot of them have in common is that they are not green. The physical presence requirement, as I mentioned, is a little bit different than residency. The person who is applying must have been physically present in the US for at least half of the previous 5 years, or if they're married to a US citizen and they're applying along that fast track rule, they have to be present for at least half of the last 3 years. Part of the form will ask them to tally up the days that they spent outside the US on trips of various kinds to make sure that they meet that requirement. The next requirement to apply is that applicants must show that they have what USCIS calls good moral character. I don't show this to you to expect you to know or memorize all of it, but just to show how complicated naturalization is. And these are things that our attorneys and paralegals will be looking for at Citizenship Day as they help people fill out the form, because any of these criminal convictions or charges, or even arrests, can really cause problems. They automatically preclude someone from being able to apply for citizenship, so it's very important for them to have a very deep understanding. These are the discretionary bars that don't automatically prevent someone from qualifying for citizenship, but the USCIS officer may use them as a reason to deny an application, and so these are other things that our attorneys and paralegals are really well versed in and know to recognize. It's quite a complicated process. For English language ability, this is determined at the client's interview. Again, this will be anywhere from 4 to 8 months after the person submits their application. It's said that the level of English that someone would need to have is that of about a 4th grade level in order to be able to pass the interview. They must be able to read and write and understand at least 1 or 2 basic sentences, but there are exceptions for people of a certain age who have had their residency for a certain amount of time. If an applicant is at least 50 years old and has had their green card for at least 20 years, they can take the History and Civics test in their own language and won't need to prove ability to speak, read, or write English. The same applies if an applicant is at least 55 years old and has at least 15 years of legal permanent residency. We have shortened these and call them the 50-20 rule or the 55-15 rule. There's also something called the disability waiver, which is something that a medical doctor must fill out to explain that this person is medically unable to learn English. It's a very strict standard, and we don't do them at Citizenship Days because we don't have doctors on site who can fill those out. Unfortunately, old age or illiteracy doesn't count for the disability waiver. It really has to be what they consider to be a medical condition. As for the US History and Civics requirement, I'm sure some people have heard about the infamous civics exam. It's pretty difficult, Naturalization applicants are given 100 questions that they have to study and memorize. The officer will give them 10 questions at their interview, and they have to answer 6 correctly. If they're exempt from the English requirement, they still have to take the civics test, but they can study and take it in their own language. There's a simplified version of the US History and Civics test for those who are at least 65 years old and have had their green card for 20 years. People who fall under that exemption only have to study 20 questions, and they're given 10, and they have to answer 6 correctly, which happens in the language of their choice. Applying for citizenship can actually be fairly dangerous for people with certain criminal convictions or other issues. If USCIS finds that someone has committed an aggravated felony at any time, has falsely claimed US citizenship, has given misleading information to a government official, committed a CMT, which is a crime involving moral turpitude, which covers anything from shoplifting to various degrees of assault or a whole host of other crimes, if someone has voted unlawfully, or if there was any kind of misrepresentation involved in getting their green card, those issues will usually be discovered during the naturalization investigation process, and that person could be placed in removal proceedings. So one of the most important things that we do at Citizenship Day is not just help people apply who qualify, but also make sure that other people who should never apply get really sound legal advice and know the risks and know the reasons that this could be an issue for them. Once someone has totally filled out their N-400, they will submit it by mail along with 2 passport-style photos, a check or money order for the $680 filing fee, or a request for a fee waiver. They'll need to submit a copy of both sides of their green card and send this entire packet by certified mail. Now that you have a bit of background on citizenship, let's transition over to what you can expect at our Citizenship Day. Volunteers should arrive no later than 9 a.m. to give you enough time to get settled in and get coffee and have breakfast, because we'll start site orientation right at 9:15. At 9:30, we will wrap up the group orientation and begin station-specific orientation. All volunteers will be in their stations during this time. At 10 a.m., we officially open the doors to clients. A lot of clients arrive anywhere from 1, 2, to even 3 hours early to get in line, just because they know that this is a huge event and maybe their only opportunity for a while to receive such quality free service. We have them start filling out the intake form as soon as they arrive so that the first group is ready to go right at 10 o'clock. The doors close to new clients at 1 p.m., but do expect to stay several hours longer depending on your station, possibly until about 5. We finish up with the clients who are in process, and so depending on the types of cases that clients present, it could take several hours longer. Right at 10 a.m., the attorney volunteers will start screening that first round of clients. The paralegals will receive those clients after the screening is done, which takes anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour. It is important to be flexible as the volume of clients can really ebb and flow throughout the day. We've had citizenship days where we've been able to stay open all day, and other times when there's a line out the door already at 8 o'clock, and we let everyone in, and by 10:15 we aren't seeing anyone new because we already have 60 or 70 people. Now let's go through the details of how clients will proceed throughout the day. There are 6 stations at a Citizenship Day site: intake, attorney screening, forms preparation or paralegal station, quality review, copy station, and the exit station. We'll go through these in more detail in a second, but it's important to note that there is someone called the flow manager, who is the OneAmerica staff in charge of the day. As clients move through the stations, the flow manager will be monitoring to make sure that all clients move smoothly through the stations and that any issues are addressed right away. If you have volunteered at our Citizenship Day events in the past, you'll notice that clients no longer check in with the flow manager between each station. We've changed this process and have now designed general volunteer roles that will take on some of these responsibilities so that the flow manager can better address needs as they arise. We'll go through these new volunteer roles in detail shortly. Here you will see the detailed layout of the 6 stations, their waiting areas, and the roles we will ask general volunteers to play during the day. As a general volunteer, you will be pre-assigned to one of these roles and will mostly stick to this one role throughout the day. Let's now go through each of these stations and the volunteer roles we will assign at each. The first station is the intake station. The client will check in here at the front desk. The intake volunteer who is stationed there will do a very basic check just to make sure that this is a person who is here to apply for citizenship, that they brought their green card, and that they have other documentation with them. Their green card is the absolute #1 thing they need to bring. We can't proceed unless they have their green card. And some, depending on their situation, may need to bring other documentation too. If they've ever been arrested or charged with any criminal issues, they need to have documentation about that. If they've been married or divorced, they need to bring certificates. They should know about these requirements because on every flyer that we've distributed, we provided a list of documents to bring. Sometimes people come and they'll have other questions that are immigration related, and they want to talk to an attorney to get advice about something else. We only do citizenship applications at Citizenship Day. No other applications, no general questions or consultations, because it really does slow up the day. We'll have an attorney referral list at the front of the room, along with other materials you can give to people, but nothing else besides citizenship applications can proceed throughout the day. The person will sign in when they arrive and provide their full name and phone number. They'll be given a number on their intake form, matching the order they arrived, so we can keep track of when everybody arrived and maintain that order. Then a volunteer will give the client an intake form to fill out while they're waiting. It is yellow and blue. On the yellow part of the intake form, the volunteer will fill in the date and the arrival number, which is the order in which the person arrived at the event, and note whether the client needs an interpreter, writing yes or no in that blank, and then stop. The rest of the yellow portion of the screening form will actually be completed by the attorney and by other volunteers throughout the event. It is in the blue portion that the client begins to fill out their information. This is something that every client needs to fill out as completely and honestly as possible when they arrive. It covers their biographical data, any marriages or divorces, the children that they have, all of their addresses that they've lived at, jobs they've had, all trips outside the US, and, most importantly, any criminal issues or interactions with police they've ever had. We want at least a couple of intake volunteers to wander around the intake preparation area in case people have questions. The client should fill this form out as completely and honestly as possible. At 10 a.m., there will be a good group of clients who are waiting and have had their intake forms filled out. The flow manager will check that these intakes are complete, and in the order that the clients finish them, the client will be sent to the screening attorney station. We'll have a couple volunteers who will be stationed as intake runners who can escort clients to this next station. I'd like to show a little demo of this intake station. You'll see that the client is going to check in at the front desk. The intake volunteer will do a very basic check of the client's green card, make sure that they're there to apply for citizenship, and that they have other documentation. They'll take a look at those, and they'll ask the client to sign in with their full name and phone number, and they'll mark the order that they came in. Once the client is done signing in, they'll be given that yellow and blue intake form. It helps to walk the client through the form and tell them where to start filling it out. They want to start filling it out at the blue section and stop before the yellow section. The client will go sit down in the intake preparation area to fill out their intake form. If they have any questions about the form, an intake volunteer should be available to answer these questions. If there's ever a question you can't answer, you can ask a OneAmerica staff person. When the client is done completing the blue portion of the intake, they will raise their hand. This will tell the flow manager that he is ready to move on to the attorney screening station. The flow manager will then look it over. She'll ask the client to complete anything that's missing, and when it looks good, she will call over an intake runner to escort him on to the next station. Hopefully that was helpful to visualize that in action. We'll have a couple demo videos during this training to give you a better idea of what your roles will look like at Citizenship Day. The flow manager, which we mentioned before, is the designated OneAmerica staff person, will be introduced to you at the beginning of the day. This flow manager will act more or less as the gatekeeper on from the intake preparation area to the rest of the stations, and maintain the flow throughout the day. The easiest way for this to work is for the flow manager to stay in one place most of the day, and for runners to escort clients to and from stations, because that way no one loses track of clients, and we don't have to chase them down, so that we're better able to keep track of all clients' progress throughout the day, and to address anything that might come up. Station 2 is where attorneys and BIA accredited representatives, and these are legal service providers who are accredited by the Bureau of Immigration Appeals to provide legal service, So those two groups of people will be doing eligibility screenings for clients. The client will arrive, they'll sit down with the attorney, they'll review their intake form, and ask those screening questions on the yellow portion of the intake. They use these screening questions as a guide to determine if this client can proceed with their application at Citizenship Day. After having gotten a brief introduction into their requirements and good moral character issues, we'll see how those screening questions aim to get out that information. It's really important to make sure that clients are as honest as possible and disclose everything that could present them with a problem later on in the process so we can address it now. If there's any eligibility issues whatsoever, or if it seems like this client could be at risk to apply without representation, we refer them out. We have a really strong network of immigration attorneys who we refer them to, as well as our other partner organizations that do low-cost legal services. We refer out clients for whom it's not a good idea to apply at Citizenship Day because they need a representative at their interview and throughout the process. We'll have interpreters stationed in this attorney room to interpret as necessary. We'll also have 2 general volunteers, which we will call room captains, also stationed in the attorney room. These volunteers will also help with tech support if necessary. We will have computers with Wi-Fi in those rooms, and sometimes attorneys need to look up court records online, so these volunteers can also help with that. Room Captain 1 is responsible for clients coming into the attorney screening room. This volunteer will bring clients from the screening waiting area. There will be numbered chairs outside to maintain clients in order, into the attorney screening room. You will want to be sure to pair non-English speaking clients with attorneys that speak their language whenever possible, and pulling in interpreters where that isn't possible. You will have a clipboard with a tracking sheet to write down every client you bring into the room and which attorney you have paired them with. On the whiteboard in the room, you will also maintain a list of attorney volunteers with the languages they speak and track here which attorneys are available. Room Captain 2 is responsible for clients leaving the attorney screening room. When an attorney finishes screening a client, they will flag you down and tell you if the client is cleared to move on through the day, or if the client is not eligible today. In this case, they will have given them a red slip. You will need to check the client's intake form to be sure that the attorney has completed the screening section and signed off. If the client is eligible to continue and fill out the application, you will then escort the client to the next available chair in the forms preparation waiting area, where they will wait for a paralegal. If the client is not eligible to complete their application today and they have a red slip, make sure the quality review portion of the intake has been signed off and then escort the client to the exit and resource stations. All clients must see a quality review attorney before going to the exit station. If an attorney brings you a client they've screened and red slipped, that client must also have their intake signed off by a quality review attorney in that section of the intake form. It's your responsibility to make sure this happens before taking a red-slipped client to exit. As a general rule, you can think of room captain roles as Room Captain 1 handles incoming clients, and Room Captain 2 handles outgoing clients. This will be the case for the next 2 stations as well, so hopefully you'll start to see the pattern as we go. After the attorney screening station, the client will go to Station 3, the forms preparation station, where all the paralegals will be actually filling out the form with them. The N400 form is 21 pages long and it takes quite a bit of time, so many clients spend at least a couple hours with the paralegal to fill that out. Again, interpreters will be pulled in as needed to interpret between the paralegal and the client. Wherever possible, we try to match up a paralegal who speaks the client's language. Oftentimes we have a lot of Spanish-speaking paralegals and Spanish-speaking clients, so we try to match those up wherever possible, but sometimes it's not possible. For interpreters, we do have translated versions of that 21-page N400 form in Spanish, Chinese, Korean, and Vietnamese, so please do use those to interpret. You don't want to be reading the N400 in English and having to translate in your head. It's really exhausting, and we have translated versions of the form. It also ensures that you use the exact legal language to interpret the questions exactly. Then we have also 2 general volunteers assigned to this room as room captains, and another general volunteer who will be helping with tech support. At sites where we do forms electronically and fill out that 21-page form on the computer, we need folks who are experienced with Dropbox, with using flash drive, who can troubleshoot any Wi-Fi issues, and who know how to use Adobe PDF in Adobe Reader. If anyone has issues in that room, they can flag down this volunteer and say, for example, Adobe PDF isn't saving, can you help? And they can figure that out. Room Captain 1 in the forms preparation room will be in charge of bringing clients in to meet with paralegals. You will bring clients from the waiting area in to work with a paralegal who speaks their language, using an interpreter when that's not possible. You will use a form on your clipboard to write clients and put who you pair them with, and also to maintain a list on the whiteboard for reference with paralegal names, languages, and the availability. Room Captain 2 will be responsible for clients who are ready to move on to the next station. Paralegals will flag you down when they finish the N400 and have it printed, and you will check this portion of the intake form for completion. Then you will escort this client on to the waiting area for the quality review attorney. Since we'll be completing forms on the computer, we will also need to be printing those out, and sometimes there can be a huge line at the printer, since we have anywhere from 10 to 15 paralegals working on computers and filling out these forms. The printer may or may not be in the same room, so the tech support volunteers will serve as printer runners as well. Someone would flag these volunteers down and say, for example, I just filled out Maria Smith's form, can you please go get it? And these volunteers would run to the other room where the printer is and grab that completed application. Sometimes we need to print forms via USB drive too, and so this volunteer will go and print it that way as well. Once the N400 is completed, the client will proceed to Station 4 to meet with their next attorney, who is called the Quality Review Attorney. This is where our most experienced attorney volunteers will be stationed to review the client's totally completed N400 and I-912 fee waiver. The client will have one or both of these, and the attorney will see if there are any issues that could have been missed. Anything that's filled out incorrectly needs to be corrected at this point. They'll review again the client's green card. We will have 2 general volunteers who will be assigned to that same room as room captains and also serve as tech support to help with Dropbox and USBs and as printer runners where needed. The quality review area is very busy for printing because sometimes we need to print all applications again, and sometimes we have to reprint several pages. And when you have 20 people doing that at once, it can be a pretty hectic situation, so it's great to have people there who can help. Room Captain 1 in the quality review room will, again, be responsible for incoming clients. You will bring clients in and pair them with an attorney, being mindful of languages. You will track these pairings on your clipboard and use the list of attorneys on the whiteboard with their languages as a helpful reference. You will need to remind attorneys that they cannot be paired with a client that they have already worked with during the screening station. Room Captain 2 will be in charge of all outgoing clients. When quality review is complete, you will check the intake form for quality review completion and volunteer sign-off, then take the client on to wait for their turn at the copy station. These are just a few additional notes about forms completion on the computer. We really want to make sure before we open to the public that all volunteers are comfortable using Adobe Reader and saving to a USB drive. We will go over this at the on-site orientation as well so that everyone feels comfortable with saving it and printing from their computers. Station 5, the copy station, is where clients get a full copy made of their completed application. Here, at least 2 or 3 general volunteers will be stationed. Their job will be to make a full copy of the client N400, 21 pages front and back, and all their supporting documentation, the front and back of their green card, and the waiver request if they have one. It's really important to copy both sides of the green card and make sure to put it on the scanner in the copy machine, not in the document feeder. We had a situation at an event where a green card got jammed in the document feeder, and then we didn't have the printer for the rest of the day, and the client did not get their green card back that day. We had to figure it out the next day. Copy volunteers will also package the application correctly and explain certified mail with the client, and talk through the assembly process and the mailing the application to make sure that all clients understand. You really want to explain that the client sends their original N400, but they send copies of their documents, and they don't send their original green card. They send a copy of the green card, copy of their court records, and the original signed N400 application. The client also keeps the copy of their N400 and the originals of their documents. It's really important that they keep that copy of the N400 because it's what they will use to make sure that they're familiar with the application before their interview. It depends on which USCIS office they're applying to, but sometimes the interview will be 8 or 9 months after they apply, so they really want to study that application because it's the basis for their interview. The copy station volunteer will need to check off what they did with check marks on the yellow intake form. You need to check off each thing you have done for the client and then print your name and sign. We ask that volunteers put their name on each checklist that they fill out just in case something happens and we realize that, for example, a page of someone's form is missing, and then we can go back to that particular volunteer and say, is it possible that this page fell on the ground, or perhaps they have found it already, just so that we can know what happened. The copy station might be the single most important station at Citizenship Day, because this is where we package everyone's application. You're the last person sometimes to see it before it gets mailed out, so you'll have to take great care in reading the written instructions when you arrive to the copy station, which will be at the station and posted on the wall. The copy station is fairly slow at the beginning of the day, but starting at about noon and especially around 2 or 3, it gets really busy here. If there's a long line of people waiting for copy, you can encourage them to visit the exit and resource stations where they can fill out an exit survey, get their photo taken, and do some other things as they wait while you make copies. We're going to do another little demo just so you can see a short version of the copy station in action. The runner will bring the client to the volunteer, and the volunteer will begin making copies of the completed N400 and supporting documentation. Sometimes the client will forget to hand you their green card, so you want to ask for it if they don't give it to you. It's very important that we copy the front and back, and again, please don't put it in the document feeder. Rather, put it on the glass screen of the scanner. Then you'll start compiling their application packet. You put their original N400 with the copy of their green card and supporting documentation together. If they have their passport photos and their check, you will paperclip those to the top of the application at the front. A lot of people don't have their photos taken and they don't have their check ready on the day of Citizenship Day, but we have a way to attach placeholder slips of paper to remind them to attach those later before they send their application. You package their application in a certified mail envelope, and we have those already assembled for you. The client will write their address on the certified mail return receipt, and you want to walk the client through exactly what those mean and tell them that they need to take it to a post office window to mail the application. They fill out that return receipt back with their name and their address. That is the portion that will come back to them when their application is received, and you want to explain to them once more that they're going to mail their original application and copy of supporting documents. You place the copy of their application for them to keep in their blue folder. Every client will have this blue folder, which is our What to Do Next packet. It has a guide so that they know what to expect in terms of what to do after they file their application, from when they'll get their fingerprinting up to their interview. The copy station volunteer will then flag down a runner to take the client on to the next station. The last station of the day is the exit and resource station. 2 to 3 general volunteers will be stationed here starting at about 11 a.m. At this station, you will have clients complete an exit survey as well as take photos and share their story for our story project. The most important thing at this station is that you collect their yellow and blue intake form. During the day, clients will come to the exit station after having been red slipped, which means that they haven't completed their N400 today. During the day, clients will come to the exit station after having been red slipped, meaning that they haven't completed their N400 today. You will need to collect their intake forms, but they will keep their red slip. You will provide these clients with resources like attorneys and service providers in their area. There will be many resources available for clients at the resource station, so be sure that they find what they need and have the information to take any next steps after Citizenship Day. When you arrive at Citizenship Day, and if you are assigned to this station, you'll want to familiarize yourself with what is available here once you get there. This station becomes very busy in the afternoon, starting at about 1 p.m. When a line starts to form at the copy station around this same time, you can go to that waiting area and ask clients for photos, interviews, and to share their story with us. Please do ask clients about their immigration story and why they're excited about citizenship, because each client has a unique story and their own unique reasons for applying to become US citizens. Take notes when you talk to clients on our story form, and be sure to note their physical description so we can match them later with their photos. Ask for their name and whether we can use their full name or whether they prefer for us to use just their first name. Their physical description is very important because we'll take photos of them later, and then we won't be able to match them up with their story if we don't have a physical description to pair that. Sometimes we get a lot of great stories and a lot of great photos, but we don't know who is who, so we want to prevent that. Here's one last demo for the exit and resource station. The runner is going to bring over the client, and the exit station volunteer will collect the yellow and blue intake form. Please be sure that you do this. No client should leave Citizenship Day with their yellow and blue intake form. This is our only way of tracking who has come to our event with their information and what happened with them throughout the day. The volunteer will then have the client complete the exit survey, which includes questions about how their experience was during the day and any suggestions they have for future events. The resource station is usually right next to the exit station, so you can direct the client here after they've finished completing the survey. This is where we have a ton of materials available for clients, and many of these are also available in several languages. The volunteer stationed here will tell the client what is available to them and help make sure that they get what they need. This could be where to find English language classes, attorney referral lists, service providers, how to fight employment discrimination, and a whole host of other resources. Again, it's very important to familiarize yourself with all of these materials so that when clients come to you with questions, you can point them in the right direction. This resource volunteer will also be sure to take the client's photo, having them write a personal note on our sign. The client is now finished with the day, and you're the one who gets to wish them well on the rest of the steps they'll take from here on out. For interpreters volunteering at Citizenship Day, we have a few guidelines and suggestions to help you with your role. When you first begin working with a client, be sure to introduce yourself and explain the procedure to them. This includes the confidentiality agreement and the nature of your support as exact word-for-word translations between client and volunteer. It is very important that you explain the confidentiality to clients and the fact that you will do only direct translations when you interpret and not provide summaries or paraphrase at all. You may also need to remind volunteers and clients to speak slowly and take many pauses so that you can interpret in between, and that the volunteer, attorney, or paralegal should look at the client when speaking, not at you as the interpreter. We have translated versions of the N400 forms, so please do use these. If these aren't out already at the station where you are at, they will be located in the boxes that go with each station. Please find these and use them. When working with the form especially, remind the paralegal or attorney to pause often so that you can interpret without them going on for minutes at a time. This will be extremely important so that you can make sure that you're interpreting an exact legal translation for clients and making sure that no information gets lost in translation. Please take breaks when you need them. We know this is a very exhausting process, and we want to make sure that you're able to do what you need to do to take care of yourself during the day. On page 19 and 20, at the end of the N400, you'll see part 14, where it has the statement for applicants who used an interpreter. Sometimes it can be confusing, and we want to make sure that this is clear. Interpreters only need to fill out this statement if they both interpreted for the client and if the client is requesting the English language exception. Sometimes we have people who have a basic level of English, but they don't qualify for the exemption. These clients will do the interview in English, but they prefer to work with an interpreter at Citizenship Day to fill out the form because those 21 pages can be complicated, and we want to make sure that there is 100% understanding on the side of the client and the volunteer. So if you're interpreting for someone who is going to do the interview in English, you do not need to fill this out. This is only for English-exempt clients and ones that you're interpreting for. Our interpreters will often be employed as runners or at other stations like Exit while they're not interpreting for a client. We don't take appointments at Citizenship Day. It's totally first come, first serve, so we don't know ahead of time who is coming. Generally, we can count on the fact that there will be a lot of Spanish speakers, but we don't know for other languages just how many we can anticipate. So if you interpret in a language other than Spanish, in most cases, you will not consistently be needing to interpret for the whole day. Instead, you will be placed at other stations while you're not interpreting. We really appreciate everyone's flexibility on this. As a last few notes, please take time to read through the station instructions for Citizenship Day because you could be assigned to any one of these stations at our event. Station instructions will be posted at each station once you get to Citizenship Day, so you'll have a chance to refamiliarize yourself a little bit with these before the event begins. Please watch your email in the coming weeks because we'll be sending out important updates as the date approaches. The volunteer roles for general volunteers are pre-assigned. Because of this, it's imperative that you give us notice if you cannot attend Citizenship Day. For those who cannot attend, we will need to reassign roles and do troubleshooting, so it's important for us to have time to do this, because every single role at Citizenship Day, from general volunteers to interpreters and paralegals to attorneys, are extremely important, and we really can't do this without every piece. Thank you so much for volunteering with us. It really makes a huge difference for the clients that we work with. They always comment on how professional and kind our volunteers have been. Someone at a recent event commented that as someone who's low income, they're used to being treated like a number when they interact with social service agencies and other free services. And they said it was a very stark difference and really nice to be treated like a human being at our event, so kindly and courteously at Citizenship Day and with such great respect. This is because of all of you. Here's our contact information if you have any further questions. Please do email us at any time if you have questions about the event or about any information that was presented here. Thank you again for taking the time to watch this training. We look forward to working with you at our upcoming Citizenship Day.